Hi friends, this is Michael Golzmane, and there has been a very rigorous seeming debate going on in many political realms, spiritual religious realms, on Facebook, on the internet, especially lately, about the role of intuitive perception versus objective and scientific perception or fact. And there seems to be a lack of harmony between these worlds, to say the least. And I want to just briefly give my perspective on this, especially for those of you who are really open to your own spiritual path and are on a spiritual path. First of all, in my experience as a man, as a person who really studied a lot of science and math, particularly in high school and college, I really have a deep love of those subjects and an appreciation for the necessity and the vast importance of science, of research, of understanding, of objectivity when it comes to certain endeavors. If we didn't have objectivity when it came to designing a car, designing a bridge, or a lot of the sciences, a lot of the engineering pursuits that involve things like physics and math and chemistry, then we wouldn't really have a good degree of accuracy or safety, and these things are super, super important. I think there's no debate about these issues. When it comes to people's inner knowings, I think that there's an entire other realm of, you might call it an intuitive science. This is as opposed to objective science that you could really look at in a laboratory and prove. There's a realm of intuitive science. And I don't think things that are intuitive or things that are inner are simply willy-nilly. These things are simply completely unprovable, unknowable, and therefore not worth our time. Seems to be a sort of a debate going on between people of wanting to use their rational mind to say, well, science proves such and such, but science doesn't prove your particular insight, and therefore what you're believing is essentially irrational. I think as human beings, and as someone who's been on a spiritual path now, on a path of conscious, doing spiritual clearing and healing work for over a decade now, I've had to meld these two perspectives in my mind and in my heart, and to be able to use my brain and my mind to a certain extent, and then to be able to go into and sink deeper into my own experience and into my own heart and see how can I know something, quote unquote, that may not be objectively provable by anyone or anything other than known within me in my own experience. Now, many of us, we all have beliefs, perceptions, and judgments. And many of these beliefs, perceptions, and judgments are erroneous, and completely they will be proved to be erroneous eventually. This especially comes in the realms of intolerance, when we hate people or judge people based on their religion or based on their race or based on their sexual orientation. And most of us are on board with kind of realizing that. Those types of things, when I say, well, I believe that such and such a religion is bad, or I believe that this political philosophy is terrible, and I'm just going to really judge it rather than having an intelligent discussion. These things I would rather we recognize as being non-rational, and that we would come to a place of greater healing and insight with them. I'm not really talking about that particular area when I'm talking about the subjective and proving and verifying the subjective. In my experience, there are insights you can have when you're in meditation, when you're practicing spiritual healing work. There are experiences you can have, for instance, of an angel appearing to you, or of direct guidance from God, from Goddess, from Spirit, from a spirit guide. You can see flashes of colors or insights. You can have knowings about things that might be happening now somewhere else in the world, things that are going to happen in the future. These things can come in dreams. This whole realm that I'm describing to you is apparently of great concern to many people who view that life should always fit into a rational box. Now, I'm not claiming that there should be or that there will ever be a scientific, rational, objective proof of God, proof of angels, necessarily proof of past lives, proof of heaven, popular book title these days. I don't think there will be such a thing. Proof of precognition, or any of these types of areas that we talk about in spiritual healing, in the New Age world, or anything like that. And I don't necessarily think that there should be. I think that we can have these experiences and say we have an opening, we have an insight in meditation, we can then let that filter in through our experience. Well, I had this experience. Is this a rational experience or not? Is it something I can prove or say, oh, this is absolutely logical according to the laws and rules of reality that I've learned from in my brain, from my society, or from my science background? It may or may not fit into that paradigm. When you initially have these experiences, though, I would say sit with them, maybe write about them, allow them to be. Some of these experiences will be shown to be later to be just perceptual and not necessarily a lot more than that. Some of them will be. But over time, I have found this way. I've tended to be, much in the past and even now, struggle with being in my head a lot. And so allowing spiritual insights and openings to come from within me that are really subjective in nature has been a challenge over the years. I would sit in meditations when I was in energy healing classes. Everyone would be getting all kinds of visuals, and they'd be seeing things, and we'd be traveling to places, and they would have all kinds of insights there and see ascended masters and beings, but I would be getting none of that. Or at least I wasn't aware of getting any of it back then. Over time, I started to trust more and more, walk on a spiritual path that was more inward focused. And when I would have these types of experiences, maybe it was a knowing about a certain energy that I was dealing with or my client was dealing with. Maybe it was seeing a particular angel or receiving a particular message or a precognition about the future. Over time, as I would observe these things and allow myself to continually check within my own being about their validity and about how I was relating to this reality, over time I developed what I would call a more objective view of the subjective. Like there's another realm of knowing. There's another realm, I would even claim, of science. It's really more of a spiritual science. It's an inward science. It's not something you can prove in a laboratory with a scientific method. But it is something you can know at a certain level. Maybe not know based on a mathematical formula, but based on an inner realization of your being. And this is where the role of consciousness comes in. We won't know these things if we're not evolving and opening our own consciousness. If we're at complete blind materialistic consciousness, everything is just chemicals, everything is just a matter of cells interacting with each other in chaotic and random ways, we're not going to be open to God, we're not going to be open to angels, we're not going to be open to spirit, we're not going to see those things. They're not going to be part of our reality because they are essentially irrational. They're beyond the level of our brain, our mind to just limit and define. But when we open ourselves to an inner knowing, we can over time develop relationships with these realities and know them at a certain deep level of our being. I would say that knowing is what in Greek is called gnosis, Gnosis. It's an inner knowing. The word science that we have is from the Latin word to know. Scio, it means to know. And that's a certain type of knowing with our brains. There's also a knowing with our inner being. So to sum this all up, this has been a little stream of consciousness, but to sum this all up, I would say continue to refine your beliefs, judgments, and perceptions. If your perceptions and judgments are causing you pain and others pain, and that's including emotional pain, mental pain, limitation of any kind, I would encourage you to begin to clear those, begin to refine those as much as possible. If your inner knowings are causing your spine to tingle, and they're causing you to just have more insight and more connection in your life, and to be able to emit more love, I would say continue to pursue that, continue to go with that path. Even if other people around you say, well, that doesn't exist, that's ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to try to fight with these people. I would encourage you just to sit with your inner knowing. Don't try to preach. Don't try to convince someone else who's not on your path, because this will never be an objective knowing. This will only be an intuitive knowing. It will only happen when you or someone else is ready for that opening. So take a deep breath, just let it be, let yourself be where you're at, continue to evolve, continue to keep that rational, logical mind, and continue to keep that openness, that intuitive, subjective, divine feminine aspect of yourself that also seeks creativity, seeks expansion, it seeks connection, it seeks validation within you. Thanks so much for watching this video, friends. Please click below to check out connecting with me if you'd like to respond or like to tell me any insights or any thoughts you have about this video. Peace and blessings to you, friends.